Hello, humans. Happy Tuesday. We are moving on to the second letter of the grapes chart, which is religion. So if you don't already, make sure you have that chart pulled up from yesterday. You should have the G for geography filled in already. If you don't, the video is still up on Canvas. You can always go back and fill that in later. But we are moving on to religion, and we are going to eventually explain what this thing behind me is. It's very important. Might be the most important thing you learned today. But before we get there, we need to set up a little bit of background as far as what it is and like why you care. So we are going to be talking about religion in Mesopotamia. And we're going to be talking about what it looks like. And this picture in the background here is actually kind of 3D rendering of what one of these buildings might have looked like. Obviously, this one is a little worn down because it's been sitting for thousands of years. But we are moving on to our daily objective in question, which is understand the important role that religion played in ancient Mesopotamia. And then the question of the day is, what role do you think religion played? So, for starters, we need to look at Mesopotamia itself and look at the earliest evidence of cities, and those would belong to an empire that we know as Sumer or Sumeria. They developed the necessary tools and expertise to settle in cities along the Tigris and Euphrates. So those two rivers we talked about yesterday. They settled along those two rivers in cities, and these individual cities became known as city-states. So on your paper, I would write down city-states, and I would write down that they are governments that consisted of the city itself and then the immediate surrounding countryside. So essentially, a city-state is the local government of an area. Usually they were independent of others. And as we'll see later on this week, they were sometimes united under one ruler, but typically they operated on their own. And the leader of that city-state controlled the city itself and then any surrounding countryside. So any farmlands nearby, that kind of thing. The most famous Sumerian city-states were and Nippur. And the reason I mentioned city-states like what they are is because they play a big role in Mesopotamian religion. These people were polytheistic. That's another word I would write down. This meant they believed in multiple different gods or goddesses, and each one of them was in charge of a aspect of our life, of daily life. Anything from the goddess of fire to the goddess of wind and trees or something. Some of their gods that I included here were Enlil, who was the god of air, and Enki, who was the god of wisdom. The ancient Sumerians thought that each city-state had a god or goddess in charge of that city. And they were responsible for making that god or goddess happy. So a big part of their daily life was making sure that the god or goddess of their city-state was happy. I saw as their main priority was to make sure that the god or goddess was happy. If they were happy, life was good. You got good crops, your life was good, everything was going great. If they weren't happy, you could run into a 2020 scenario where it seems a lot of bad things keep happening. But they thought that if we make these gods or goddesses happy, particularly the one in charge of their city, then life could be good. They thought that if something bad happened, such as a drought or a flood or whatever, okay, we did something to make the gods angry, so therefore we need to do something to make them happy, and then this will go away. So like I said, they thought that their role, the ancient Sumerians thought their role in life was to make sure the gods or goddesses were happy. They thought that was their biggest role in life. There was also a great fear among the ancient Mesopotamians that if the gods were angered in any way, they could easily destroy the earth to kind of show off, hey, we're not happy, so we're going to destroy humanity. There's an ancient story that we may talk about later that deals with one of the gods being angry at a local city-state for something, and he decides to destroy that city with a flood because they were being too loud, or I think it was they were being too loud, so they decided to destroy the city with a flood. So in order to make sure they were happy, you needed to be able to communicate with said god or goddess. And the problem is only one person could do that. Only one person had the ability to talk to the god or goddesses, and that was the priest. I'd be sure to write this down too. The priests were the only ones who could talk directly to the gods and goddesses. And because of this, priests were at the top of Mesopotamian society, because making sure the gods are happy and talking to them is very important. And so obviously if you have the ability to do that, you are a vital part of society. And so it was thought that the priests were the key link between heaven and earth, if you want to go that way, and that the only way you could communicate between the two was to talk to the priest. This devotion, this idea of talking to the gods, goddesses, to make sure they're happy, ran so deep that the Mesopotamians built these massive religious temples known as ziggurats, where the priests would live and would do all of the communication with the god or goddesses. These ziggurats, these religious buildings, were by far the tallest buildings in the city. The thought was, the taller it is, the closer you are to God or the god or goddesses. So therefore, you want to make your religious building as tall as possible. And the rooms at the top of these buildings were exclusively for the priests. Not even the king or the king could get inside. At this point, we don't have very many queens who are in charge of everything. It's usually a man running as a king. And a lot of times, even the king wasn't allowed at the top of these ziggurats to talk to the goddess or gods. Only the priests could do that. So some argue that the priests were more important than the king or of the city-state. And so I believe that is all that I have. I do want to make sure that after you watch this video, you will be reading, I can get to pull up, a page from Discovery Ed that should kind of explain what we're doing a little bit better. Maybe. Yeah, here we go. I just want to show it to you real quick. It's only a page. And you are only reading section 1 of this tab. You don't need to read 2, 3, you don't need to read those. You only need to read this page here. And then watch the minute video at the bottom. You don't have to mess with these two unless you want to. But I do want you to read through this. A lot of the stuff I talked about here was kind of talked about again here, and hearing it a different way might make a little bit more sense for you. But I do want you to read this before you go on to the assignment, and you only have to read this one page. You don't have to read anything else. Other than that, that is all I have for today. You guys are good to go on to the next page of the module. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow.